Big Ben. The heartbeat of the nation. A symbol of British democracy. Its 4 great clock faces have watched over 6 monarchs, welcomed in 29 prime ministers, and survived 2 world wars. And throughout it all, it's celebrated nearly 160 New Years. Big Ben is one of the most photographed buildings in the world. Yet what the cameras don't see is that it's falling into disrepair. Now, tens of millions of pounds will be spent to bring the clock tower back to its former glory. In this programme, in the build-up to the repairs, I'll get the lowdown from Parliament's principal architect. A driving force behind these dramatic plans.
You're going to take all of these...
We're going to take all these tiles off.
And has that ever happened before?
No, this will be the first time that these have been taken off,
How
yes.
extraordinary.
I'll follow the 3 clockmakers.
Look at it, it's an amazing period piece.
Who are taking apart the great clock's entire mechanism for the first time in its history.
I mean, what's the thing about doing it that makes you feel the most twitchy?
Working out where the bits that are left over go.
As this conservation project swings into action, I'll reveal the story of how Big Ben was nearly never built.
So this most famous building wasn't even an idea on the plan?
Yes, that's right.
And as controversy breaks out over the silencing of Big Ben,
It can't be right for Big Ben to be silent for 4 years.
I'll question why the great clock means so much to all of us. Why it's become a powerful symbol of our identity, and why it evokes such a sense of national pride.
Big Bell, the sound of London. The correct name for Big Ben is the Elizabeth Tower, after Queen Elizabeth, 60 years on the throne. We all know it, of course, as Big Ben. The big bell inside the tower weighs in over 13.
Big Ben, the Elizabeth Tower. This is where you'll be one of the very few people that will see Big Ben as it is now, because it's all going to be covered up with scaffolding, so you won't be able to see it for quite a while as well here. Now, we're going to go round.
I've been involved with historic buildings all my professional life, and have been fortunate enough to work on some of Britain's greatest landmarks. Yet for me, there is one structure that stands above them all.
And there it is, Big Ben, like some incredible gilded rocket headed for the heavens. And it is a building that absolutely lives up to its reputation. You never feel anything other than a slight skip of your heart when you see it. And it represents something to all of us in some way, something political maybe, or national, or very personal. And if I think about Big Ben, it reminds me of my childhood and New Year's Eve and the sound of the bells through the radio. And it's really hard to think of another building that really is anywhere close to Big Ben in the sense of representing something to all of us.
This fairy tale tower is about to become a building site.
Okay.
Over the next 4 years, we have exclusive access to explore behind the scenes of one of the world's most important conservation projects. There's only 1 week to go before work starts.
Hi,
Anna,
Adam.
hello.
Nice to
Very
meet you.
warm welcome to the Houses of Parliament.
Thank you very much.
Let's walk along the colonnade.
Adam Wachowski is Parliament's principal architect and a key player in Project Big Ben.
There can't be many cantilever stairs in single runs as long as this.
I don't think so. I think this is probably reasonably unique in that respect.
The Elizabeth Tower, as it's officially called, is 96 metres high.
Just passing the entrance to the dials.
The only way up is to climb 334 steps.
That's the clock mechanism room. And this is it, we're just coming to the end now. Another 20 steps or so.
Oh, my
Here we are in the belfry.
Oh my goodness, it's absolutely amazing up here.
That's right.
It's like being on top of the Eiffel Tower or something. It's so much metalwork, isn't there?
A huge amount. This is the bell frame, of course, and right in the middle is Big Ben. And this bell doesn't swing, it hangs there, and then the hammer hits it, as you can see.
Big Ben is the name of the Great Bell, but today it's used colloquially for the whole clock tower. It rings out at 118 decibels, almost as loud as a jet taking off.
That's it. The reverberation is huge.
Incredible.
Yes, it goes on
it's like
for
being
quite
at
some
some
time.
amazing sound installation. The thing that, of course, is so extraordinary is that this is all the original stuff. But also, I guess, that is the massive challenge of this place, because it comes with having to maintain it.
It does, but then that's what building conservation is about, isn't it? It's about staving off decay.
Yeah, and you can see some quite serious issues, can't you, with the condition of the metalwork?
This is a good example. You can see quite clearly the water's getting behind it, and the ironwork is beginning to rust.
No.
Pollution and the elements have been attacking Big Ben for decades. Rain has forced cracks in the masonry, rust in the ironwork, and damaged the stone. The cost of repairs has initially been budgeted at £29 million of public money. It's a huge undertaking, particularly as Big Ben is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The team must safeguard the tower's exquisite details. The winged gargoyles carved into the stone, the gilded orbs and crosses, and the Victorian ironwork laced across the clock faces.
This is like being in a movie coming in here, isn't it?
This is the 39 steps, isn't it? This is the 39 steps all over.
Honey, you're not going to...
There's no alternative.
But they may be able to set that thing off by hand anyway.
I feel like I'm Richard Hannay. About to start dangling off one of the hands.
You have to dangle off one of the hands on the other side.
Gosh, it does not disappoint, does it,
No,
standing
it doesn't.
here?
It
And obviously that's carrying the
That's carrying the
clock
hands.
mechanism through, yeah.
That's carrying the hands on both sides.
Yeah.
That's right. There's concentric shaft up there.
And then I see, yeah, we're going through a little
We
narrow
go through
corridor.
this little narrow corridor at the side here, and we come into the next one. They're all just about identical. So this is the base of the iron section, the spire. And for 30 metres or so, you get the metal hat on top, which is the spire on top of all this. So these towers, of course, go all the way up, and if we go onto the staircase in the middle here, you can just see just how huge this is and what a major undertaking it was.
So these are, you're going to take all of these...
We're going to take all these tiles off,
cast-iron
yes.
tiles off. And has that ever happened before, since this was...
No, this will be the first time that these have been taken off.
How
yes.
extraordinary.
Yes.
One of my favourite bits in any big conservation project is when the roof comes off, because you see it's like skeleton of a whale or some amazing thing that you feel like you'd never normally get to see. So it's going to be a once in a 150-year opportunity to see the bare bones of the thing.
The top of the tower is going to be stripped down to its original frame. Its giant hands, over 4 meters long, removed. The 4 faces, each one large enough to drive a double-decker bus through, will be taken apart. And 2,567 cast-iron roof tiles and other parts restored. One of the world's best-known buildings is about to become unrecognisable. Big Ben is one of the top 5 selfie spots in the world.
Say cheese.
It's magical. It's better than I can ever imagine. It's amazing.
I love you, you're perfect.
But in the Victorian period, it was more than a tourist destination. Standing at the centre of the British Empire, Big Ben was the most accurate turret clock in the world. Big Ben is just one of 2,000 clocks in Parliament. There are only 3 clockmakers to take care of them. Every morning, before MPs arrive, they walk the 3 miles of corridor to tend to the clocks. And 3 times a week, they climb the stairs to wind the great clock. Today is Ian's shift. He's agreed to take me to the heart of the tower, where Big Ben's clock has been ticking for almost 160 years.
Oh my goodness. Wow, this is it.
So this is the Great Clock of Westminster.
Look at it, it's an amazing period piece, isn't it?
It's fantastic, it's Victorian engineering.
The mechanism has been running almost continuously since it was built, ticking every 2 seconds. That's over 2.5 billion times.
You know, it's so wonderful because this is what you would, in your fantasy, like to think was at the top of Big Ben. And you come here and it's like you're in a Sherlock Holmes movie or something.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's big, it's bold, it's Victorian.
Astonishingly, in the age of digital clocks, Big Ben is kept precisely on time with a pile of old pennies on the pendulum. Adding or removing a coin varies the time by 2/5 of a second a day.
So the shaft comes out and does the minutes on the...
Because you can see that's the back of the clock face there, isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
yeah.
Perfect.
So every 2 seconds, driven by a weight, which is on that barrel in the middle. So we have...
So that's the wire there, from which the weights are dangling down in the great sort of...
You have one weight on that one.
The clock is run entirely by gravity. 3 weights hang below the clock mechanism and run up and down a shaft in the centre of the tower. As the weights drop, they provide the power to drive the clock and ring the bells. After 3 days, the weights will have travelled towards the bottom of the shaft.
And presumably, you have to literally do something, wind those weights back up.
We
literally
do.
wind up the clock.
This is the winding handle.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You slide it onto the arbor,
Yeah.
and then push it round. It's as easy as that. Do you want to go?
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
I'm pushing down.
Push down.
Oh, it's quite... Oh, you can feel there's quite a weight there. Oh, my goodness.
It only takes about an hour and a half.
So this middle bit's the clock bit, then?
Yes.
So what does this enormous barrel here control?
This is the quarter train, or the chiming train.
So that's what makes the ding-dong happen. So the point here is that...
Every 15 minutes. It's great, isn't it?
It is.
It's very difficult, not just to stroke.
I was going to say, do you talk, when you come in, do you say, good morning? Do you talk to it?
Yes.
Yeah, I bet you do. I
Yeah.
would if I was you.
Yeah, well, we spend so much time up here looking after it. You start having, I won't say a relationship, but a friendship with
yeah,
it.
friendship. I completely see that. You must feel like, well done, when it's done.
You
it's
survived
done.
another week.
The mechanism has had only one major breakdown, and it nearly destroyed the clock.
chiming train was rebuilt in 1976 when we had a bit of a disaster. So the 1.25 ton weight underneath this one accelerated out of control down the tower because the shaft that goes up to the fly fan broke and it just came apart. What they found, the barrel here, which weighs a ton in itself, had got so fast that it actually rattled around and smashed this end of the train up. All this section here was smashed to pieces.
Oh my goodness.
Bits of this was stuck in the wall.
Oh my goodness. Goodness, nobody was in here. You would have been killed by flying bits
you
of
would have
metal.
been, yeah.
But it does make the point, doesn't it? Why it's so important to maintain every piece of this really, really well, and why it's so important what you're about to do, because it's not simply, oh, well, the hands of the clock might stop going around, but the whole thing might simply sort of more or less explode.
The damage was devastating, putting Big Ben out of action for 9 months.
Gosh, you must feel like you want to put your arms around it to sort of safeguard it from all the potential, you know, the potential things that might damage it during this process, because she's sort of like a rather sort of gentle old lady who needs looking after. I suppose I'd always thought, probably like most people, that the clock tower, Big Ben, that the sort of history slightly ended when you got inside, and that behind those famous faces there might be some sort of quite modern bit of kit that was plugged into the mains. So it's been an absolute revelation to understand that that just could not be further from the truth, and behind those clock faces is the original mechanism from the 1850s. And it does also make you realise how absolutely crucial the clock element of this amazing project is, because foreseeing any problems with that clock is something that's going to be crucial to ensuring that that clock can keep on running. Because if it ever was the case that it stopped being that mechanism and it was plugged into the mains, it would really be like the soul of Big Ben had somehow gone out. What the team are taking on here is eye-watering. Big Ben is one of the most famous buildings in the entire world, and they are decapitating it and reconstructing it inside and out. But more than this, although we've seen Big Ben in many movies and television programs, it isn't, of course, just a stage set or even just architecture. It's actually a big machine with this enormous clock in it, and the bells and the weights and the amazing mechanism has got to keep on operating once the project's done. And if it were my project, the sleepless nights would be countless. So what they're taking on here is really astonishing. This morning, work officially begins at Big Ben. 20 removal men have arrived to clear out the clock tower. They're quickly discovering that there's more to Big Ben than meets the eye. The tower has 11 floors that few get to see. There's old parliamentary offices, a workshop, and even a Victorian prison, once used to lock up unruly MPs. On the 10th floor is the mechanism room, and surrounding it are 4 giant clock faces. And at the top are the bells. This morning, all the action is on the 7th floor, with Amanda, one of Big Ben's longest-serving employees.
Now, I was expecting that to be bubble wrapped.
Yeah, we'll bubble wrap it, yeah.
You're going to bubble wrap it?
Of course, yeah,
OK, right, yes, bubble wrap. Back to your bubble wrap. OK, back to bubble wrap.
Amanda usually organises small public tours of Big Ben, so today's guests are a little different. She has to make sure they carry every object out of the tower without damaging a thing.
Room 7. Everybody, room 7. This train is room 7.
Room 7, please. We don't think the clock tower's ever been emptied on this scale ever before. We've got an awful lot of items in the clock tower, some items that come from our historic furniture collection, some items that have come from our works of art collection, and then items that are architectural fabric.
Amanda has worked at Big Ben since leaving school.
I've got 3 children, really. I've got 2 girls, and then I've got Ben as well. It's affectionately known as the 3rd child in my family. All right, gents. OK, right, in here we've got some historic tools, OK? It is quite fragile, obviously, with the glass. I am concerned. It's glass. And we want it back in one piece. Very sad, but we need to do this work. We've only got to look at the flaky paint and the blown plaster work to know that this is the right thing that we're doing. So putting your personal feelings aside and going, you know, we need to restore this clock tower.
Every item carried out requires a round trip of 700 steps. This is not your usual 2 up, 2 down.
If we go for the chairs now, please, that would be great. A chair each. Careful as you're going down.
Downstairs, the clockmakers are gearing up to take apart the most famous clock in the world.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Anna.
Their workshop is deep in the heart of Parliament, in the basement near where Guy Fawkes was caught with 36 barrels of gunpowder.
I mean, we think of the building as Big Ben kind of colloquially, but what do you call that big clock that's on the clock tower?
We still call it Big Ben.
Unless it's misbehaving.
Yeah.
And you call it a very naughty boy,
Yeah.
presumably. So when you get into work in the morning and you see Big Ben, I mean, does it elicit a particular response in you?
It's strange. Even when I come out of the tube, one of the first things I do is actually look up at Big Ben. I've got a watch on, but I still look up at Big Ben.
That's to check it's still going.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if it said something different from your watch, that's presumably cause to panic.
To look after the most iconic clock in the world, it certainly ticks the boxes, doesn't it? For me, I was an apprentice in East London in a basement. If you'd have said to me one day, you're going to be looking after the most famous clock in the world, I just wouldn't have believed you. Any time, don't matter when you're up there, you look down and all you can see is cameras flashing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
and no matter what time of day.
Yeah.
You can be at 4 o'clock in the morning
Someone's
and you will
taking a
actually see
photo of it.
cameras flashing.
And they're still at it. Tell me about what the issue is with that clock in terms of what you're going to be doing in this project.
It has had 1 or 2 slight issues with the timekeeping, being a little bit more than it would normally be out. It's fluctuating, and this could be due to the pendulum. We're keen to look at that. This is a pendulum out of a smaller clock, obviously. So, and the pendulum on Big Ben is 14 foot long and swings every 2 seconds. So at the top there is this thin steel spring, and that is just bending backwards and forwards. So eventually that will break. This is actually a spare suspension spring we have for Big Ben.
Oh, so literally this thing you could be dangling the
and this
pendulum
is
from.
Going like this, and so you could find it starting to crack there. So this is one item that we will replace anyway, as a matter of course. And this could be part of the reason that the clock's had 1 or 2 issues recently. The timekeeping.
And presumably, like any bit of complex machinery, the business of taking it apart is one thing, but the business of putting it back together is a different thing altogether. I mean, what's the thing about doing it that makes you feel the most, twitchy, or going to be the hardest part?
I don't know. It's working out where the bits that are left over go.
Amanda is preparing to say goodbye to Big Ben.
It's time for me to leave the tower and pack up. There we go. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss that. I'm really going to miss being up here. So I've brought so many people up the clock tower and shown them around, and I love watching people's faces light up. Okay, so this is our visitor book, which we introduced into the clock tower about 15 years ago. Interesting people that have been up. Bill Gates has been. Here we have at the very top of the page, we have Prince William. Here's Michelle Obama, the White House, and her 2 daughters. I escorted the team that went up with her, because as you can imagine, it wasn't just Michelle Obama and her 2 daughters. There was quite a lot of other staff from the White House that also went up to enjoy the tour. She was thrilled to be able to hear Big Ben actually chime the hour. The stairs, she had no problem on the stairs whatsoever. She bounded up the stairs ever so quickly, as did her daughters. They were absolutely charming. I think it's because it's witnessed so many great things. It's part of our heritage. It's so strong and steady. It's a symbol of our democracy. And that, I think, in the 21st century is, you know, a nice thing to be proud of.
Big Ben has stood witness to some of the most important moments in our history, both good and bad.
You lot! Get under cover now! Get under cover! Down the street! Go! Move yourself! Go!
Order! I am now going to suspend the sitting of the House, but please wait here.
There has been a serious incident within the estate. The alleged assailant was shot by armed police. An ambulance is...
An act of terrorism tried to silence our democracy. A terrorist came to the place where people of all nationalities and cultures gather to celebrate what it means to be free. And we meet here in the oldest of all parliaments, because we know that democracy and the values it entails are embodied here in this place. Today we meet as normal to deliver a simple message. We are not afraid.
Tonight, the clocks go forward for the start of British summertime. It means the clockmakers have a rare opportunity to stop Big Ben.
This is the one time of the year we actually get to stop the clock. So what we actually do is stop it at 10 o'clock. Then we advance the hands to 12 o'clock. So it's just the one opportunity we have to do a little bit of maintenance and check things. So it's great for us, really, because otherwise the clock's running the whole time, and the only time we, you know, if we have to do any maintenance, I think we have to do it while the clock's running. Shame it's such an inconvenient time, but...
To move forward Britain's favourite clock...
You think that's enough?
First, disengage almost 14 tonnes of bell.
Well, the clock's still running now, but we've barred off the strike train, so the hours won't get struck, and we've barred off the quarters, so they're 1/4 past, 1/2 past, 1/4 and just before the hour won't work.
Second, turn off the lights so you don't confuse the public.
Okay.
Next, release the weights and let the clock whiz forward.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And finally, stop Big Ben's entire mechanism.
It is quite, yeah, it's eerie, isn't it? I do say to people that the silence is almost deafening to us, you know what I mean? It's just, we just hear it all the time, the ticking, we take it for granted. People come in here and comment on it, but, you know, because it's always there, we kind of almost don't hear it, and when it's not there, we hear it. It's unusual for us to come in here and find it not ticking, thank goodness. Okay.
It's time to restart the clock.
You've got 35 seconds. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. happy with that.
The clock tower has been cleared of nearly 160 years' worth of history. Now the contractors are moving in and conservation work is about to begin. Big Ben's monumental conservation project is underway. The tower is now empty, except for the clockmakers, who are always on call to make sure Big Ben keeps ticking.
Is it very bad?
Yeah, it is.
Ian and Paul have spotted a problem. A badly worn cog in the strike mechanism.
You look at that leaf that's engaged, it's over half missing.
That's really bad, isn't it? I mean, it is, isn't it?
If the cog isn't replaced, the bell will eventually stop ringing. But there's no way of repairing it while the clock is still running.
Yeah, that's something we need to look at, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We've spotted something that we weren't aware of, and we'll have a closer look at it in a minute, but it's just something to add to the list.
It's a serious issue, but stopping the great clock is far from easy.
Quite a big thing. You have to go through lots of procedure if we decide we need to stop the clock to do some work. You know, we have to go to the keeper of the clock. He has to ask the speaker. It's raised in the chamber, in the Commons and the Lords chamber. So it's quite a performance to get the clock stopped. But being as we've got this project coming up and the clock's going to be stopped in part, it's an ideal opportunity to do it.
Big Ben has been the pulse of London since it was built. In Victorian Britain, it stood at the centre of the empire, a potent symbol of the power of time. Before the Industrial Revolution, timekeeping was rough and ready, revolving around the rise and fall of the sun. All that changed with the coming of the railways and factories. Time became money. Employees started to work to deadlines, and lives were regulated by the clock. Time zones across the globe were set to London Greenwich, and Big Ben was hailed as the king of clocks, standing as a beacon of accurate timekeeping in the heart of the capital. Soon, turret clock fever spread around the world, from the Gare de Lyon in Paris, to the Parliament buildings in Canada, to the Memorial Clock Tower in Birmingham. Every town wanted its own Big Ben. Today, Birmingham is home to one of Europe's leading clock schools. At the College of Jewellery, students go on to work for some of the industry's biggest names. And they all start by learning about Big Ben. I'm here to find out what made Big Ben the most accurate clock of its kind.
When they were designing Big Ben, they needed it to be super accurate. It would be pretty embarrassing for a country if their nation's timekeeper was sort of like 5 minutes slow one day. It had to stand alone in accuracy and craftsmanship.
When Big Ben was being built, Parliament wanted its clock to push the limits of technology. It had to be the tallest and most accurate clock in the world. But there was a problem. Tall clocks were bad timekeepers because the weather conditions on high buildings affected their accuracy. Even a strong gust of wind could blow the hands in the wrong direction, driving the energy back into the clock and through its escapement, the crucial mechanism that maintains the swing of the pendulum.
So they needed a sort of escapement which would maintain an equal amplitude of the pendulum regardless of anything that was going on the outside with the hands.
The solution came from a cantankerous barrister and amateur clockmaker, Edmund Beckett Denison. He invented an escapement that changed clockmaking forever.
I'll set it running.
Denison's escapement used gravity, not mechanical force, to regulate the pendulum. This kept the pendulum separate from the hands of the clock, meaning that the weather couldn't affect its swing or timekeeping. The great clock's new technology allowed it to be taller than any other clock in the world, meaning that even if you couldn't see it, you could definitely hear it.
The real reason that Big Ben is the scale that it is so it can be heard and seen over such a large distance. So the first clocks, and the name clock comes from the word cloche for bell, but just bell-ringing machines. They didn't have dials on them until sometime later. The most valuable thing about it is what it communicates to people when it rings those bells.
Big Ben weighs more than 13.5 tons, and its chimes can be heard over 5 miles away. To create a bell this huge is an extraordinary feat of engineering. Big Ben was cast in 1858 at the Whitechapel Foundry in London. Its owner, Alan Hughes, is going to show me exactly where it was made.
It's over here, is that right? Somewhere that Big Ben was cast?
Absolutely right here. There was a large casting pit.
And that's literally a sort of big
just a hole in the ground. Just a huge hole in the ground. The metal, of course, didn't have to be carried in the liquid state because the mould was just beneath the ground.
Yeah.
So they just cut little channels in the ground and the metal ran...
It must have been like a volcano.
Well, that's right.
Streams of molten metal.
And when that was done, then it was lifted to the ground. Again, ropes, pulleys, men, and then 16 white horses to tow it from Whitechapel to Westminster.
Londoners lined the streets to catch a glimpse of a bell so large that it was famous even before it rang out for the first time.
The business of making Big Ben so big, was that about the volume of the noise that you get when it was struck?
I suspect it was all about Victorian pride.
Oh, yeah.
We are going to build this enormous new House of Parliament with this huge tower. We are going to have the largest clock in England.
Yeah.
We are going to have the most accurate clock in England.
Yeah.
This is all about Victorian pride.
Yeah.
We had the empire and we had huge, unstoppable confidence.
So it can be done.
It can be done, and we are going to do it because
Yes.
we are British and that's what we do.
Yeah.
The chimes of Big Ben were first broadcast on New Year's Eve 1923. Soon they were heard daily across the British Empire.
You see Big Ben on the telly or in print or whatever, to think of it as what it looks like, which of course is extraordinary, but actually as important, if not more important, is what it sounds like.
It is the sound. I think one of the most moving moments I had was some years ago. I was visited by a bell founder from Austria, and I took him up to see Big Ben because he wanted to see it, and we were there when it struck 12 and tears were running down his face, and I said, you know, are you okay? He said, you have absolutely no idea what this means to me. He said, during the war I was a child and I sat with my father in a basement where we couldn't be detected, listening to the BBC broadcasting from London. And he said, we knew that if we could hear Big Ben, there was hope. In spite of everything that was going on in Europe, when we heard Big Ben, we knew there was hope. And he said, being here, seeing the bell, touching the thing, brings all that back to me.
So moving to think that the very same bell that reassured that young boy in the basement all those years ago still rings out today. And the plan is that Big Ben will continue to chime whenever possible during the major restoration works that lie ahead. It's been 2 years, 2 months and 1 day since Project Big Ben began. and results have just come through from the ground survey. The area around the tower is stable enough to support the enormous weight of scaffolding. The major works are given the green light, and Project Big Ben swings into full-scale action.
It's a really big day today, and we really need these cabins in place, so it's a great start. So they're going to be used for, say, welfare and site accommodation for all the staff that are going to be working on the project. So a lot of activity in the Westminster area. There's been sort of road closures, obviously having to stop all the pedestrians moving about.
Big Ben will soon be encased in scaffolding, and only the finest craftspeople, from carpenters to master masons, roofers to gilders, will work on this multi-million-pound conservation project. Before scaffolding starts, Alan Hughes of Whitechapel Foundry, where Big Ben was cast, has been called to the tower to check a crack on the bell.
So this is just explain to me about this, Alan. So that's the crack there, is it?
That is the crack.
Yeah.
There's also another one over there.
Yes.
The crack is almost as old as the bell. It happened 2 months after Big Ben was first struck in 1859.
So am I right in understanding that the crack was caused by the original hammer?
Yes. When we made this bell,
I love
we
it
said
that it's
that
we.
the
It's
hammer.
so brilliant.
Hmm?
It's wonderful that it's we. You know.
Well, it is we.
You know, it's
I mean,
your
it's the
wonderful
Whitechapel
foundry.
we.
Yeah. Yeah.
We recommended that the hammer weigh no more than 1/4 of a ton.
Yeah.
And fall no more than 4 inches onto the bell. The advice was ignored, and the hammer that was placed was 1/2 a ton.
Crikey,
and
so
it fell 6 inches onto the bell.
So twice the size of what you
Twice the
recommended.
weight, and also falling
Weight.
through a greater distance.
Yeah.
It was recorded and measured in 1859.
Yeah.
And the size of the hammer was reduced to the size that we recommended in the first place.
And that's been fine.
And that has been hitting the bell ever since.
You should have followed the advice in the first place.
Well, yes. I mean,
I told
yes.
you so. That's what you mean.
In 1863, engineers were forced to cut a hole in the bell to check how badly it was damaged.
Because on the face of it, as a non-bell expert, it looks like this is much, you know, a bigger intervention in the bell than that little tiny crack there.
That's the only way they had of establishing the depth. I mean, today we have ultrasonic testing devices, and it would have been a straightforward job.
Yeah.
This is the only way they could find out the depth of the crack.
And how far through the depth of the bell is that? So that's my hand going in there.
I mean, that's somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 inches. But
Yeah.
at this point, the bell is
How deep is
the bell
the
is
bell?
9 inches thick.
Okay, so actually it's only
so it's about
even
a
though
third
that's
of the way through.
Yeah, wow, it shows you how thick the bell is.
The only thing I think left to do now is just to pop inside the bell and just make sure that where we have these cracks on the outside, there is no evidence inside.
This is technique here, let's see.
Alan assures me there's enough time to check inside the bell before it rings again.
You easily have to sort of crawl in, don't you? Whoa, it's like being in a massive sculpture.
So on the inside of the bell, you have this sort of crust.
It's that greeny crust, what's
the
that?
greeniness, that's mainly copper carbonate. These chalk marks,
Yeah.
that is the chalk that I put on 20
Really? That's your doing?
That's my chalk from 20 years ago.
So it's over here somewhere that the hammer strikes it.
Yes, the hammer is somewhere in this area on the outside. And there's no evidence of any distress or anything there. So.
After a full inspection, Alan gives Big Ben the all clear.
The inside, no sign of any cracking, no sign of cracking anywhere else. In other words, absolutely no change. In fact, nothing has changed since 1859.
When the Houses of Parliament were finished, Big Ben was in the last phase of construction. And remarkably, it almost wasn't built at all. Parliamentary archivist Mark Collins has dug out some early plans.
First of all, it wasn't there. It simply it wasn't formulated as part of the original elevation. There is a tower, but it's very squat.
So that's where Big Ben
That is
now
the position of it, yes, that's it, but no clock.
So this most famous building wasn't even an idea on the plan.
Yes, that's right. This drawing, which shows the development, and you're much closer to what you see today.
So in this sort of evolving version of the design, I mean, you have got a clock tower now, You know, it's not the most prominent feature on the site. It's not sticking up much higher than everything else.
No.
So here it is, beginning, as it were, to grow out of its sort of little stump into being something a bit taller and having a clock on it. But this isn't where we end up, is it?
No, in this later drawing, you can actually see that the architect is working out some of the detail of the top of the tower, which now begins to look very much like what we have today.
So why is it that Big Ben is the thing that we all know about and all?
I think it's because it does have a personality of its own. It has a face, and it has a voice. And it's very pretty as well. It has a toy-like charm.
Yes.
I think people fall for it when they're children,
yes.
And they keep with it.
The thing that's so striking is it wasn't part of the original design. It was something that only even as a concept was happened upon during the process. And yet somehow, out of that, something so perfect and so successful was born.
Today, the 800 tons of scaffolding is starting to go up. This alone is a monumental task. The clock tower is almost 100 metres high and will take 6 months to cover.
Steve, what are we looking at here?
The issue is with the scaffolding, because there are other buildings all around the tower, you can't bring the scaffolding right down to the floor.
Yeah.
And so we have to bridge over. For example, this wing of the building here, we have to bridge over this with a very large structural steel girder. But what we can't do here is we can't fix the scaffolding directly into the face of the tower. We can't drill holes into the tower and screw it in to hold it in place. What we're doing is we're using Big Ben itself to effectively prevent the scaffolding from swaying in the wind.
Right.
So the scaffolding, it's like it sort of puts its arms around Big Ben and holds on to Big Ben to stop swaying.
But how do you know that in doing that, it isn't, by transferring some of its sway to Big Ben, isn't destabilising Big Ben itself?
Well, we've done a lot of work we've had to look at all of the stresses that creates in the existing structure.
Well, I'm sure you're right. Let's hope so.
Sadly, Big Ben's creator, Augustus Pugin, never lived to see his Gothic masterpiece completed. In 1852, the rest of the Houses of Parliament were opened in a lavish ceremony, leaving only Big Ben to finish. Pugin stayed at home, working feverishly on his final designs for the clock tower, when he became grievously ill.
It was here that he was engaged in the final stage of the Westminster project, working on the clock itself.
By the time he was doing this, he was extremely ill, and he had a psychotic breakdown. And it all coincided with the opening of the House of Commons. Queen Victoria came along and opened Parliament in the new building and knighted Charles Barry. And immediately after the ceremony, he came down here. And I think he must have known that Pugin was dying. Doing the clock face, final bit, again, that was something that Barry couldn't do himself. And he did come down here, and we know, because Pugin wrote about it, he stood over Pugin, who was barely conscious. He records that in his letters, that he kept having a nip of brandy to keep himself going. And he finished the drawings, and he died in the September. So that drawing for Barry of the clock face was the last thing he did.
How astonishing.
It is astonishing.
So this is the tomb of Augustus Pugin, who died here in Ramsgate whilst he was completing the drawings for Big Ben. And the terrible thing is that he was only 41, so young. And here he is, like a medieval knight in his tomb with his feet resting on his heraldic animals here. So that in his death, he was still somehow channeling the Middle Ages, which had been his whole life's work, and which, although he would never live to see it, would of course be realised in the great building that he created in Westminster.
Today, the future of Big Ben is in the hands of a team of experts and specialist contractors.
I mean, that must be quite a thing to be involved in. There aren't many buildings that are as iconic as Big Ben.
No, I mean, it's quite incredible. It's, you have to pinch yourself occasionally, think, oh gosh, I'm working on Big Ben here. It's the most iconic symbol of Great Britain or parliamentary democracy in the world.
And I guess one of the things here is that with any conservation project, you never know for certain exactly what it is you're doing until you can get right at the thing you're dealing with.
From what we can see from down here, it shouldn't be too bad.
It's difficult to know though, isn't it? Because in my experience, actually things that look perfectly all right from the ground, when you get up close and you literally start wobbling them with your hands, you can find that then
that's right.
they're not as stable as you thought.
It could well be worse than we think it is.
Yeah.
And that's the point, of course, at which you upset everybody because they'd suddenly discover their budget's not quite what it should be.
Yeah. In what ways do you think that, despite the fact that Big Ben's going to be covered in scaffolding, that it's still going to be able to sort of play its, you know, icon of the nation job?
Yeah, but I think visitors to the Westminster area are going to, it's going to be a shock for them, but it's got to be done. So we want to preserve it for future generations, and the way we're going to do that is to obviously just do this work. We won't cover all the actual dials, faces, all at the same time, so something will always be displayed, which is really good. Obviously, we'll keep chiming and for as long as we possibly can.
But Big Ben's chimes are silenced much sooner than anyone is expecting. It's a shock announcement that is reported around the world.
Big Ben's bongs have become an international talking point.
British icon Big Ben silent for the next 4 years.
The famous chimes of Big Ben will fall silent.
On Monday, the parliamentary authorities announced plans to silence Big Ben for 4 years.
Yes. Yeah. No, I didn't know this. I think we're actually losing something today, and I don't think we're going to really appreciate that until the next hour when there'll be silence.
It can't be right for Big Ben to be silent for 4 years.
The Honourable Lady will be aware that there's strong views. The House Commission met last night and agreed to continue with the cessation of the bells for the time being.
The uproar is much more than anyone anticipated. Yet Parliament presses on with plans to silence the bells because of risks to the hearing of the workers on the scaffolding.
It's not a problem at all. I mean, people are upset about it, which is absolutely understandable, and we've thought long and hard about what to do about it, but actually there isn't anything we can do about it at the end of the day. Of course, the bells would have been switched off anyway in about 4.5 months' time to take the clock apart, but we've had to bring that forwards because of the difficulties of these chaps working on the scaffolding. And I think it's actually quite flattering that people are that concerned.
Now Big Ben will only be heard on special occasions, such as Remembrance Sunday and New Year's Eve. And it's all down to Paul to disconnect the bell.
So it's a big day, isn't it?
It is a big day, yeah.
I mean, it's been amazing how much there's been in the press, and I guess that in part must be a reflection of the fact that people do really care about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably people underestimated how much, you know, it is meant to various people.
It is an expression of how much it matters, and sort of love, really. Will you miss the sound of the bells?
Is the Pope Catholic? yeah, of course we'll miss it. The clock's going to keep running, so we're going to keep the actual hands are going to go. It's mainly because of the workmen that are working on the roof. They can't be exposed to the ringing of the bells. So.
Yeah. And when you're up there, you really realise how true that is, don't you? Because the noise.
For us, to hear it not striking and chiming, it definitely will feel bizarre. I mean, I must admit, even when I see old clocks not running, I kind of think, what's the point in having it? You know, if you've got a clock, it should be ticking, its heart should be beating, I guess. So, yeah, we'll miss it.
It's nearly 12 o'clock when Big Ben's bells will chime for their final time. The clock will now be silenced for the longest period in its history.
It's surprising how many people had decided to come.
It's just the beginning, that's the funny thing, isn't it?
It is the beginning.
There's no turning back now, is there?
Shall I start disconnecting these?
Yep. It has been an extraordinary day, and as the reverberations were dying away from the final strike, a great cheer went up that you could hear filling the air around the tower.
OK, you just count me down and I'll stop when you say.
Roger that.
And it does remind you how much Big Ben matters to people. Something which is so important to this project, because not only are the team here dealing with a Grade 1 listed building, but they're also dealing with an international icon.
Be good to go.
The level of public interest, not just on the streets, but in the newspapers and all the debate that's been going on, is an expression of that. The team here know that with everything that they do,
1 foot.
quite literally, the world is going to be watching them.
Eagles.